Welcome to my channel, Syphe IT. In this channel, we're going to be covering a wide range of topics from network design and troubleshooting, web development, CSS, PHP, MySQL, HTML. We're also going to cover virtualization and also cloud computing. I hope this channel will be beneficial to you, to whatever information you're seeking to learn. And if you follow through all the steps, I believe you will be able to quite understand how the different topics that I'm covering will help you. Please subscribe, like, and share this channel by clicking on the link below. So right off, we're going to start by creating a small local area network for a small business or an organization or even for home. We are going to be using 3 devices for this lab. The first device we're going to be using is Fortigate FortiWifi 20C. We're also going to be using a Hp 2610 POE switch. It's a layer 3 switch, and a Windows Server 2019 standard edition. So the layout of the design is going to look this way. Your ISP provider, obviously through the cable to the cable modem, from the yellow port for the Ethernet into the back of the Fortigate WAN port, which is the red port. From the LAN port, that's port number 1, we will connect to the port 1 on the switch. From port 2 on the switch, we'll connect the server. I'm also going to be adding a wireless access point, a HP 530 NA for wireless connectivity or Wi-Fi service within the network. So right before we jump into the actual configuration, I'm going to cover a few definitions of all these devices and what they really stand for. Right off, we're going to start with what is an application firewall. An application firewall is a form of firewall that controls input, output, and or access from, to, or any application or service within the application firewall. The application firewall operates by monitoring and potentially blocking input, output, or system calls that don't meet the configured policy of the firewall. An application firewall in a nutshell is policy-based firewall, where you create all the policies, and if the traffic does not meet the criteria for that policy, then it's not allowed. The communication is not allowed into your network. In other words, the data is not allowed, or the traffic is not allowed into your network. What is a next generation firewall? A next generation firewall is part of a third-party generation of firewall that combines a traditional firewall with other network device filtering functions, such as DPI, deep packet inspection, and intrusion prevention system. So typically, next generation firewall typically has an application firewall, and it adds a few more filtering functions. For example, the intrusion prevention system is kind of like the system that protects your network from hackers. It can be able to detect if there's any attempt to hack your network, maybe from a DOS attack or a DNS attack. What is a layer 3 switch? A layer 3 switch combines the functions of a switch and a router. If you don't know the difference between a router and a switch, please look it up. But anyway, for me to help you out a little bit here, is a switch only allows communication within a subnet or a VLAN. A router allows communication between the local subnet and other subnet. So in other words, it allows communication with other subnets at super high speeds. What is a server? A server is a computer or a system that provides resources, data services, printing services, file sharing services, or even sharing a program to other computers known as clients over the network. In theory, whenever a computer shares resources with client machines, they're considered servers. So in this lab, the specific configurations we are going to do is on the FortiGate unit, on the FortiWifi, we're going to assign it a static or a manual class A IP. If you don't know anything about class IP addresses, please look up class A, B, C, and D and know what the difference. This is the IP class A range that I'm going to use. And for my design, from top to bottom, I'm going to have the router, the firewall as number 1, the switch as number 2, and the server, I will explain later why I'll have it at number 12 on a different VLAN. I'll cover that later. Also, I will show you how to disable DHCP on the Fortigate. The reason why we have to disable DHCP is the server that we have on the network is going to be the one providing DHCP service to all wireless devices connecting and all wired devices that are connected, including the desktop I have and the server itself, and also give IP addresses to, for example, your TV if you have it on a network, your security cameras. That's what the server is going to do. Right off the box, the FortiGate, the FortiWifi 20C, the internet access traffic is denied. So right off the box, the default setting, it's denied. Once you configure all the above, you have to create a security policy to allow internet access into the entire in and out of the network for users to access resources online, etc., etc. All right, so let's jump into starting the configuration of the FortiWifi 20C. Now let's jump into the actual configuration of the FortiWifi 20C with the settings that we discussed earlier from the slides. The interface you're looking at is an interface to log into the FortiWifi 20C. I'm using FortiExplorer. You could download FortiExplorer, connect a USB cable to the Fortigate device, and it should be able to register on this software. So we'll log in, we'll create the static IP on the unit, the IP that we discussed about, 10.76.0.1. We'll disable DHCP and create an internet security policy to allow internet access into the units. So I'm going to go ahead and log in. Wait for it to load up. I'm going to maximize this window so that we can have better view of all the settings that we're going to be working with here. If you can take a look over here, you'll see the dashboard, the network, the config, the admin, the policy and object, security profiles, VPN, user log. All these settings, we're going to cover them in the future videos. For now, we're going to cover how to connect to how to assign a static manual IP to the unit. So what you do is you click on network, you click on interfaces, and we don't want to do anything to do with the WAN interface. I don't have a static IP from my ISP. I have a manual. I have a dynamic IP. If I had a static IP, then I'll go in here and change it to static IP. So right now I use the IP the ISP provides me. So for us to change this static manual IP, we right click internal and we click edit. Wait for it to load up. Right where it says addressing mode, make sure manual is checked. Okay. Also on the physical interface members, make sure the Wi-Fi and the local area network show here. Okay. Then right here is we assign that IP we discussed on the slides. 10.76.0.1 with a 24 subnet mask. And we also have to disable DHCP. All we have to do is uncheck this. Why? Because we have the DHCP server that is going to be assigning all the IP addresses. Okay, and you click OK. So as you can see now, the static IP here has been assigned to the design and the class A IP that we want it to have. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to minimize this window. Down at the bottom on this window here, if we don't see it on the window, you should probably see it on your unit, because my window is not big enough. Click on the policy and objects. This is where we're going to assign the internet security policy to allow incoming traffic or outgoing traffic for users to be able to go online and search the web or do whatever they want. So we have to create a policy to allow internet access, because right off the box the default setting on the Fortigate, it's disabled. So what we do is we go here and create a new policy. Wait for it to load up. Give it a minute, it'll load up. Alright, the incoming interface is gonna be any. For now, we're gonna allow all kind of traffic from anywhere to be allowed into our network. The source address is gonna be all. We're allowing all kinds of incoming connection. If you look at the drop down here, you can decide which type of network you only want to allow. For example, if you want your organization only to use a Google Drive network and all these other networks, you just select those networks. But for this specific, we're going to allow all addresses to be allowed in. I'm going to leave nothing. I'm going to leave the default here for users. You can change this anytime if you have specific users and groups that you want to access your network. Source device type. We're going to allow all devices to have access to the network from outside. So we're going to allow all. You can always change if you want to have like a gaming console just to play with some people only on your network. You don't want them to be able to see other devices on your network. You can select that. You can say only Android devices are allowed. But for now, we're going to do all. Outgoing interface is the WAN port, the wide area network port on the Fortigate unit. That's what's going to get the data out to the web or to all the other DNS servers. Destination address, we're going to say all. We allow it to go to every address as possible. Schedule will be always. Here is where you can change your schedule. Let's say you're in a school where you want to limit internet access for students. You can always schedule when they can have internet access, even for your home, for example. You can schedule times when they have to be away from the internet to do other activities or whatnot. Service, we're going to service all services. I'm going to be allowed here. The action is to accept, which also is allow. Then once all these settings look that way, you click OK. Wait for it to. Now, as you can see, the internet service has been allowed, and the service is Right over here, top right under the count, you can always see the packets coming in and out of your network. So that's it for now for configuring the FortiWifi to have access to the internet, assigning it an IP address. The next will be configuring the switch to be able to speak to the FortiWifi or the Fortigate unit. So we have to go into the HP switch and configure the Fortigate as the gateway. Once we've configured that as a gateway, then we'll create the VLANs. We'll assign the switch IP address. Once we create we also create the IP helper address. We will create the routes. There has to be a route for all the data from the switch to be routed over to the Fortigate unit. We have to untag and tag some ports. We also have to create what's called an IP address for each single VLAN, so that each single device that's connected to a specific port on a switch, the data is routed properly, and so it's easy to manage the network and easy to troubleshoot the network. So stay tuned for the next video on how to configure the HP Layer 3 POE switch.